We're thrilled to have James and Abby from Autistica here today. I think in the UK we're very lucky to have such a brilliant autism research charity that has just the right ethos that I think lots of researchers are looking for. And we're really delighted to hear more about how you're going to be supporting early career researchers through the Discover Network.
Perfect. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to share what we're doing and also to be able to learn about what everyone else is doing. I've been wondering in my head about how I start this talk. Effectively, Abby will be doing the second half and I'll be doing the first half about why Autistica exists and why we've taken this approach towards involvement. And I guess probably the first place to start, considering that we've been talking a lot about identity, is to probably declare the fact that I've been diagnosed with autism myself, and I was diagnosed when I was 12 years old. So, as a few people have alluded to, that brings some challenges in terms of identity and in terms of how you're perceived, because the moment you disclose that, you are immediately prejudiced against, or people form opinions about you based on that. And so I'm personally very, very careful about how I talk about that. It's not that I'm in any way ashamed about my diagnosis. I'm aware that it does require some control in terms of how I discuss it, because people will make decisions about me when I do decide to discuss it, or people will make decisions about me regarding how I decide to communicate that. So that's where my interest in autism research began, and I guess I have always been very, very interested in the differences that we see across everyone. And my, I guess, first interest was in why are autistic people different and why do those differences occur. And also I really saw research as an exciting opportunity to really improve outcomes for people, improve lives, and really drive progress as well. But I always felt, much like many people have expressed today, that we haven't really done a good job of harnessing the opportunity which research presents. I think it's a very valuable tool for improving people's lives. And I think a lot of that is shrouded in the fact that we talk in a language which is very researchy. So Autistica used to talk in its prior vision before this about understanding the causes of autism, developing evidence-based treatments, and finding ways to diagnose autism in a timely and early fashion. And I think I always found that slightly odd, because although I think that there are good reasons for doing those things, they can ultimately improve outcomes, really why we exist as a research charity is to make, hopefully, people's lives better. And so we've really changed our vision towards long, happy, healthy lives for all autistic people. And that's really about being focused on outcomes and having a research strategy which is optimized towards achieving that objective. The second thing that we've really tried to change is to see ourselves as more than a research funder. So that is specifically to say we don't just fund specific research projects. And that's a very classical research charity way of doing things. So typically how your research charity will do things is they will open a grant round, they will apply for researchers to apply for this pot of money, and they will just leave it to researchers to serendipitously develop a plan for how they're going to make things better. And effectively you end up in a situation where you get just a mixture of different things, which it doesn't really have an underpinning strategy for actually achieving your vision. So it's just a hodgepodge of things. And so I think we have really felt that that's not really how to achieve the vision which I just set out. You need to have more of a strategy than that. You need to be more specific about what you're trying to do. So what we're really trying to do through our new research plan and our new strategy is to be the catalyst for impactful and life-changing autism research in the UK. Some of that is through, as an autism research funder, thinking hopefully as intelligently as possible about how we can spend the funds that we have to develop the best research and the most important research to the autistic community. And then the other side of that is about but we are now the only really national autism research charity in the UK. So how do we act as a voice for autism research in the UK and ensure that the right autism research is being undertaken, and we can create a structure where research actually does make a difference? So in terms of how we've thought about the involvement of autistic people, probably one of the obvious real starting points for us was the James and Alliance priority setting partnership we undertook. This is a very long, objective, validated process, but if the take-home message is that we got top 10 questions for autism research, which were jointly created with autistic people, with parents, and some clinicians as well. And so, just to give you a sense, the top 10 are in your pack. So there was, the top 3 priorities were mental health, language and communication, and social care. And these weren't an enormous surprise to us because we'd been having this ongoing dialogue with our community. And in particular, mental health was really coming through as an issue which was of particular importance. So, and we also knew that there was a high prevalence of mental health problems as well. So this was really impactful for us because it gave us a sense of direction and a sense of this is how we can form our research strategy. This is where we need to be funding research. And actually, if you looked at the landscape of autism research funding, research into mental health and autism, there was a limited amount of it. So that's the one thing we can do, is we can fund research. The second thing we can do is to look at policy work. And then we can also act as a catalyst for autism research as well. And so this is what I'm meaning when I say that we're looking to be more than just an autism research funder. And so we've really worked in terms of what we do to ensure that we're not just funding research, but we're doing policy work now based on the current research evidence that we have to ensure that we're making an impact as well. And then we're also creating these workshops as well. So the idea behind the workshops is that we get, we begin to at least partially solve this problem, which I've seen expressed at a number of events, which is that, so I sense that even within researchers and across autistic people and different groups, there is a beginning to become an awareness that we need to become better at involving autistic people in terms of the formulation of research ideas, but precisely how we do that within the context of the current structures, it wasn't very, very clear. And the idea behind these workshops is that you get everyone together in one room to go through a facilitated process which ends in people developing co-created research ideas. And we've hosted 3 of these workshops so far, and they've been very, very effective, and they've come up with ideas which we have already began to directly fund. So this is these international summits which I was talking about. This is one on autism and epilepsy, and we had one on physical health as well. And as a direct result of that, we commissioned a project looking at health checks in autistic adults, and it's the biggest project that we've specifically dedicated funding towards yet. So this is just a quote from KB, who I'm sure many of you all know. I'm sorry if it's not too easy to read, I'll read it out. Active consideration of autistic people's comfort and respectful discourse, wish I could bottle and take these attitudes everywhere. And that was really, really pleasing for us because this was the first time that this summit was the first time we'd ever done this in over 2 days. And it is quite terrifying before you undertake these events because you really want to get it right. And you really hope it works. You're getting a group of researchers into a room to do something which they haven't done before. And it really requires complete buy-in from everyone. And so I think that what we learned from that process is actually it's very, very promising. When you bring people together and you create that environment for that collaboration, it is, you generate really fantastic solutions. And so involvement's really been a key part of also our policy work as well. So we're not just a research funder now, we also seek to ensure that evidence is flows through into policy as well, and ultimately into people's lives. And so in terms of how we generated this campaign, we worked very, very collaboratively from the beginning with autistic people and parents to ensure that that campaign accurately reflected what they wanted from the evidence as well. And so this was a not one size campaign. This was about saying that taking a homogenous one-size-fits-all approach to mental health provision is not particularly appropriate for anyone, but in particular for autistic people, it's not appropriate as well. And so that's where we are. I think in terms of driving forward autism research in the UK, we found ourselves about a year and a half ago coming up against a bit of an issue, which is that all of this needs to sit behind a structure, really, doesn't it? And we need a way of bringing people together in order to drive forward progress in autism research in the UK. And I'd seen aspects of that tried in autism, but I'd also seen other research areas where they had been effective in making progress, and it felt like there was a real opportunity to learn from other areas. And I always start with the caveat that I'm not comparing autism to dementia or cancer, but they had developed these research networks which had been proven to be very, very effective at driving forward progress in their specific areas. It felt like there was an enormous opportunity to take that model and make it participatory. So what happens in cancer dementia is a bunch of doctors get together and decide how they're going to drive forward progress in cancer dementia effectively. And we were not up for proposing that particular methodology within the context of autism research, but it felt like there was an opportunity to take that methodology and make it participatory. And that's what we've tried to do through Discover, which is to create this network which brings together autistic people, researchers, and people with all types of different experiences to drive forward research. So we had this idea, and we felt that it could be really impactful in terms of achieving our vision. But then we had to get it set up, and it's easy to have an idea. It's hard to actually be the person who does it. So I'm going to hand you over to the person who does it, because they'll be more able than I to describe how Discover works.
Thank you. Thanks, James. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about how through Discover in particular, we're really going to kind of maximise involvement of autistic people at all levels of what we're doing. So we launched Discover in September at the London Transport Museum, which you can see here. We had this really fantastic launch event, which was just really exciting. And one of the activities that we had on the day itself was we asked people to sign up to Discover and actually pledge their reason for signing up. So what is it that you want autism research to deliver? What's your sort of hopes and aspirations? And this is one of my favourite images from this exercise, because I think over the next few slides, I'm going to talk about our kind of structure and strategy with Discover, but really what I think we all want to achieve is what's kind of encapsulated here on this slide. And also I think it really highlights the importance of asking people what they want from research, involving people and engaging with people, because everyone has a different opinion about what research means to them. So since the launch, which was in September, we've had just under 5,000 members who've signed up. So this is both researchers and autistic people, family members and other professionals. And the National Autistic Society and Autism Alliance are partners on the network, and we also have 21 network hubs located around the UK, which are universities that are really sort of central focus points for autism research. So in terms of membership, we've really seen a huge response in terms of people really wanting to get very involved across the nation, really. So in terms of aims for Discover, there's two main aims. One is to boost autism research in the UK, and one of the aspects of that is really supporting early career researchers. And the second one is just really maximising involvement of autistic people at all levels. And one of the things I want to kind of get across is that these two main aims are really very much intertwined. So the main ways that we will be boosting kind of involvement of autistic people through Discover is with this structure that I'll talk through here. So there's three main levels to it. So the first one is that people can sign up online and they receive a regular newsletter. And people sign up either as a researcher or as a community member, but that's not to say that researchers aren't also autistic researchers. These two distinctions are really just that the researcher category is people who are more actively engaged in research or conducting research studies themselves, whereas community may be people who are less kind of professionally engaged with the research content, so may have a higher proportion of autistic people, family members and carers. And we have these two distinctions just simply because in terms of what people receive, there's we need to sort of send people communications that's more specified to their needs, so about research funding, for example. So at this very basic level, people just receive information about research, and we really hope that for the community that can really help people to understand the latest research updates and really understand how the latest research that's coming out is actually relevant to their lives. And we really hope that by kind of increasing this engagement with latest research findings, we can encourage people to actually take part in research at a high level. So this is the most basic level, and we know that not everybody wants to be more involved than this, but for those that do want to be more involved, our second kind of level of involvement is that we have an Autism Insight group. So this is really the kind of core group which will be kind of like maximising involvement through Discover. So the Insight group is a group of autistic people with experience of autism, so autistic people, parents and carers, who really want to be more involved in the research process, so who want to interact with researchers and influence the research that goes on. And there's lots of different activities that Insight Group members can get involved in, so providing feedback on studies, also co-designing studies, or even providing advice about how to run autism-friendly events that are aimed at disseminating research. And the idea with the Insight Group is really that it's a kind of Autistica managed centralised resource for researchers to be able to come to. So Laura mentioned in the introductory talk, or actually I think Hannah mentioned in her talk about the difficulties for researchers sometimes being able to engage with participatory research around lack of resources or finding it difficult to do so. So really this is something that we've set up to try and make it easier for people to really be able to do this. So as early career researchers who are here with an interest in doing participatory research, if you'd like to engage with the Insight Group in your work, then please do get in touch, because that's precisely the purpose of the group. And so we launched the group in November, and we had over 90 responses, which is just incredible. So people have, this group is just really raring to go, essentially, and everyone's really, really keen. So yeah, it's just a very exciting initiative. So the Insight Group is kind of the core from which all of our other involvement activities kind of leap off from. So this links into a sort of separate initiative that we have, which is our autism study groups. So our study groups, which we'll be launching the first one quite shortly, are based on a model that we developed in consultation with the National Cancer Research Institute, who are one of the primary funders of cancer research in the UK. And they told us that their model for study groups was the most efficient way of boosting research in particular areas of need. So based on this model, we will this year be launching study groups focusing on complex needs, ageing and physical health, mental health, and language and communication. And each of these study groups will have 12 members. So these will be composed of senior researchers, early career researchers, and other professionals, and also crucially insight group members will be embedded in this process as well. So through inclusion of insight group members in these study groups, we're really helping to ensure that the voices of autistic people and people with experience of autism are really embedded at all levels, because the idea with these study groups is that these groups will be responsible for really developing the future of autism research, focusing on these particular areas. So in addition to the kind of levelled structures that I've just told you about, one of the, perhaps one of the most important things that we're doing at Autistica is we will soon be launching grants for autistic researchers. So in terms of involvement, what's better than actually enabling and encouraging more autistic people to actually be the leads on their own projects and lead research themselves. So that's something we'll be announcing quite shortly. So another thing that we are doing this year, which also really embeds involvement at all stages, is we are hosting the first of our annual Autism Research Conference.
It won't be as big as this.
No, it's not, yeah. But it's still something to be excited about.
Got to control expectations.
Yeah, good point, James. So it's going to be on the 6th of September at City University. So it's in partnership with City University of London this year. And critically, with the conference, we wanted to, bring researchers together and allow them to, start discussions. But also we wanted to make sure that autistic people and family members are part of those discussions. So what we're going to be doing is having subsidised places for autistic people and family members to be able to come. But we're also looking into live streaming or recording to make sure that for those who aren't able to attend in person, this material is available to as many people as possible. And also, critically, within the conference structure, there's going to be panels focusing on particular areas, and each panel is going to have a scientific chair, but also an insight group co-chair. So again, this just really makes sure that there's autistic people and family members who are involved at all stages. So I'm just going to finish off with three kind of considerations, or really it's more things that I've kind of learnt about from my own experiences of kind of being in this job and my own experiences of involvement. So the first one is about representation. So I think Brett mentioned diversity before, and one thing that I think it's all for all of us it's worth thinking about is that involvement is kind of it's such a great thing to do, but we should also be considerate to whether, the fact that there's certain groups that may be less easy to engage with in certain circumstances. So, there's various different reasons for this. Historically, over autism research, there's been less research looking into women and girls and adults. But there's also socio-economic and demographic factors that mean that people may less often engage with research. Also, people with complex needs and minimal verbal ability, we may less often involve in our work in various aspects. And then just an important point is about confidence. So I think in involvement we should all be attempting to make sure that we enable people who don't necessarily have the confidence to just sort of speak up when requested, because I think that can I think it's just an important thing to consider. The second thing that I think is an important consideration is about being dynamic with your work and with your involvement. And I don't know if Georgia Pavlopoulou is here. I think she was going to attend, but I'm not sure if she is here. But this is really about a project that she is sort of really responsible for, which is that, so Georgia, I think, responded on Twitter to some requests from autistic adults for more research, specifically focusing on sleep for autistic adults, because there really hasn't been that much research. And Georgia, because of that, with Dagmara, who's the director of Lilas Lab at UCL, hosted some workshops with autistic adults to really understand their views of this. And then also, we recently at Autistica collaborated with them on sending out a survey to find out about the priorities of autistic adults around this research area. And I think this is just a really good example of not only involvement in general, but also being, really dynamic with your research and with your involvement, and responding dynamically to the community that you are researching and engaging with. And the final thing is just really, so Bella Starling is a Wellcome Trust research fellow who writes blogs about involvement. She writes quite a lot of reflective blogs about her own experiences. And this was really relating to a blog that she wrote recently, where she's discussing the complex kind of issues that you can come across in terms of involvement. So there's, very complex issues around things like power dynamics and, dealing with emotions and things like that. And what she said in the blog, which I very much agree with, was that this isn't an area where we need to think of it in terms of having more processes or, more rigidity. It's much more about treating people with respect and values and dignity, and also developing real, genuine relationships. So that's why the third consideration is just being human and remembering that that's okay. And I think that relates to a point that Laura made as well about, sometimes people will make mistakes in this kind of work, but I think that's okay as well. So that's everything. So if you haven't already joined Discover, then please do so.
I just had a very quick question regarding your study groups. I noticed that while you're dealing with some very important topics, like aging and political health, mental health and language, and communication and complex needs, I wonder why perhaps there is not right now a study group to do with sort of the massive influence that the media has on producing knowledge of autism, which is definitely a very big topic, especially within critical autism studies. So I was just wondering, perhaps, will that happen in the future, so us media researchers can be a bit more involved as well?
Yeah, I think I've had personal experience of that this week, and I share your concerns. But I think, our research strategy, so in terms of our priority areas, we review them every year, and so we base them on community priorities or things which, having engaged with the community, we have confirmed to be a priority. So physical health is an example of something that the community didn't come to us with, but we came to the community with and said, is this important to you? When things become an issue and we get a sense from our community that they are an issue, so we've used the JLA, we will focus on them. I think a really open question and an opportunity for Discover, which we're trying to work out. We're kind of trying to work out how we do things, but is how we use to Discover to make sure that the community are on an annual basis setting priorities. And so, the Autism Insight Group, a question that I'm sort of having is, could they be at least setting one of our strategic priorities every year, so that those sorts of ideas are coming through, because that wouldn't have came from that sort of idea. Probably I wouldn't have came up with myself, but I think it's a really good idea. But that's because I probably think in a slightly siloed sort of way about things, but I think that it's a really important topic.
Hi, I'm very interested in the launch grant ideas for autistic-led kind of research, whether it's for postdocs or for those wanting to find funding for MAs or PhDs, that kind of thing. So just any comments about your ideas, plans for that would be good.
Yeah, so I guess there are a couple of ways in which autistic people can get started into research. There are the autistic grants. There's also the collaborative grants, which we haven't talked about in the context of this conversation. But once a workshop has been completed, we autistic people and researchers can work together to develop a project. In terms of the autistic grants, autistic researcher grants, the idea behind that is that we want to give people a pathway to getting started in research. And so the idea behind our involvement is that we move all the way through to people getting started in autism research. Now we need to be conscious of who we are and how much funding we have and what we can promise to do and what we can't promise to do. So at the moment we're focused on getting people who haven't had prior experience of leading their own research project into research. And so the idea is that we give people that first step into research. So unfortunately, it's probably less for people who have experience of research and more for people who are looking for their first step into research as an independent researcher. And we just think that that's, you know, with the funding that we have, that's the fairest thing to do, is to give people that first opportunity, because we want to open doors and include participation. I'm aware that there are challenges if you're an autistic researcher about getting further funding, and we would be keen to support people in other ways with that.
I'm not aware of many research projects at all which had a project lead who was autistic, of any age or experience. And so I also know there are plenty of autistic people with doctorates who have less employment than I do currently, for example, or none at all. Yeah. So I think there is a real need of how we support postdoctoral researchers into the field as early career researchers, as well as earlier in the process than that as well, obviously. Yeah,
I agree, and this is you know, for us this is our first step in towards doing this. We will also be in the next month announcing an award called the Future Leaders Award, and that's for people with a PhD who are looking for their first independent grant. That's open to everyone to apply. So hopefully that fills some of that gap. I take your point, and we need to be doing more to ensure that there's autistic representation, you know, in all stages of the academic career. You know, I don't have a perfect solution for that, simply because of the amount of funding that we have. We couldn't support anyone. You know, we for example, we couldn't fund anyone to do a professorship. Like, it's out with our reach, to be honest with you, at the moment. Hopefully that changes.
Wonderful.